So you were explaining that working of that servlet by diagram and all.
All right. So that was the first diagram that I had made. Okay, so let's begin with the container right now. Let's see whether the same diagram is stored or not. Okay, so this is the screen. Is it visible to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Right. So we were discussing about what a container is. So, so what happens is when we let me draw the thing first, so it will be easier. So, do you know about the service method that we had discussed, or we didn't get to there? Did we discuss about the service method or not? Yes. All right. So, this is our container. First of all, let's write the do get method here. Right. Request response. And we have a service method here with request and response parameters. Right. Then we have a servlet here, and it is a container. This is our web browser. Here we are trying to understand the working of the container. Right. Okay. So what happens is, yeah. So what happens is, when we have our container here, right? So when our container gets a request, right, it creates two objects. What are these objects? These objects are for one is for request. It creates two objects. One is for request and one is for response. Now what happens is, and so there are so many servlets kept on the server side, right? And the container finds the required servlet that we have requested. Now what happens is when that servlet is found, the container makes a copy of the servlet, right, which is called as thread. The container makes a copy of a servlet which is called as thread. Right. Now what happens is, then it passes that or forwards that request to the and response to the response object to the thread. Right. Then it passes all those objects, request and response, to the thread. These request and response object to the thread. Then what happens is the thread calls the service method. Right. What does the thread does? It calls the service method and passes those parameters in that service method. Now service method, this just so this service method, what it does, it checks it checks whether the request is coming from the get method or post method. Right. What it does, it checks whether the service is coming from a get method or a post method. Right. So the service method checks it, and let us consider that the request is coming from a get method. Right. So if a request is coming from a get method, then then the service method will call the do get method. Right. If it comes from the post method, the service will call do post method. Now will sure see that where this get and this post method, where can we find them? We'll see that. Now what happens is, since we are considering that do get method is getting called, that means the get method is called, right, the request is coming from the get method. So what happens is the service passes those parameters, the request and response parameters, to the do get method. Right. Gets passed to the do get method. Now what happens is, uh, do you remember that we created a form in HTML and CSS, and at that time we talked about that we are going to send the data of the form to somewhere. We'll discuss about it later. Even if you don't remember it, we'll just do it there. Right. So what happens is, when we collect data in our form and then we request it, right, then what happens is, the all the data of the form will get fetched by the request object, right, and an output gets generated by the response object. Right. The content is fetched with the request object and the output is generated with the help of response object. Now what happens is, the container will take the HTML output. The container will take the HTML output from the response object, and what happens is, it displays this object. It takes this object to the web browser, and then it gets displayed there. Now what happens is, after the container, okay, so there's one more thing. The request, this one is for request, and this HTTP response, this is for the response. Right. So what happens is, when the container delivers the request, delivers the response to the web browser, what it does, it deletes both the objects of request and response, clearing the memory. Right. And the output, the HTML output, which was passed from here, it goes to the container, then it goes to the web browser, and we see whatever we see in the window, like our Chrome's window or any browser's window. Right. So this is what the process occurs. Now then another thing that we had to do is, we had created a file here. You can see that this servlet file. Right, we created the servlet file. Now we need to see how this file works. So let's create a new project. Okay, so it's easier in NetBeans. We can do it manually as well, but we are doing it in NetBeans because it will be easier for you to understand. So let's create a project, new project. Let's write it as, and since we are developing a web application, okay, so yeah, Java web. We are developing a web application, right? So please follow these steps. This is really important for you to create a project of your own. You can take a screenshots in between, and if you miss something, then please let me know. I'll explain it. Okay, now let's name our web application. CDE. Let's name it. Now what we are going to do is, let's click on next again. We'll click on next again, and we'll click on finish. That's it. Alright, so what has happened is, we have created a CD project. Right, you can see it here. Now there is something written here. Now Okay, so we need to configure few things here. We need to add a library here. You can see that in this folder we can see we have to add a library here. Right click on this libraries, then add a jar folder. Click on this. Why are we doing this? Because we need a connection with the database, right? So make sure that you have this MySQL connector Java 8.0.19 jar file, and we have to just open it. Are you following with me or not? If you are following with me, then you will be able to make a project right now, because it will be hard if you do it alone. Okay. So another thing is we have source packages and we have web pages, right? So here in this web pages, we have to create our web pages, right? For example, we have index.html right now, right? So this is our basic HTML page. Let's write it as h1 here. Okay, so if all this is confusing to you, just delete it, and it's just a title. You can see that our page is something like this only. HTML page is something like this. Okay, so let's say the title should be let's type cpn. Save it, and here this button is used to build or run the project, right? You can even right click on this, and you can um, okay, you can right click on this and then run a file. So you can see that to do write content, that was written as the heading here, right? H1, and it ran just nice, right? Now what we need to do is we need to have our Java code connected with it. Okay, so let's connect to it. So what you have to do is in this source packages, you have to go to the default package, and what you have to do is right click on it. You'll see a new here, and since we are creating a servlet page here, right? Servlet page. Let's name it as maybe index. All right. Then next. Then be sure to click on this add information to deployment descriptor web.xml. If you don't click on this, then we'll have to do it manually. So we don't want to do it manually. We'll just click on this. We'll just finish it. Right. You can see now that there's a web.xml file has created here. Okay, so don't think about it much. Let's clear all this so that there will be less confusion. And our class name is index here. That's why index is written here as well. Right. And let's write. Okay, so let's do one thing. Let's copy our code from here and just paste it. And, since the class name is index, here we should name it as index as well. Index. Right. Now about this, actually the O is supposed to be capital, and these are correct. Right. Now we can see there is no error here. There is no error here. Now, see, this is a Java file, right? And let's see whether we can run it or not. We are just running this. Okay, so we don't need to run it from here. What we'll do is, since we have this index.html file, right? Now what we are going to do is, let's say, okay, yeah. What we can see here is we have this index.html file, and what we are doing here is, you remember the anchor tag, this tag. Do you guys remember this or not? It is used to create a link here, right? To create a
Yes,
link
sir.
between two files, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to link our HTML page with our Java page, right? Java servlet page. So what's the name of our servlet file? Index.java, right? So we'll just write index here. That's it, just the name. And now we are going to run this project. So what we can see here, that the index.html file, it has a to do content, to do write content, and a click link. So when we click on this click, it will take us to the servlet page, hello world. You can see that our servlet page is hello world, right? So it took us to the servlet page. Now how can we make it work? So let's write a few code. Now we are just going to mix all the codes, the database code and the HTML code and the Java servlet code. It will all just be blended together really nice, and you will see a good website getting developed. Right. So let's start the development now. So have you guys installed the NetBeans in your devices, or are you able to follow me till here, or else you'll forget? And, okay, so let's create a form here. Trust me, you can have a web project yourself. Even if you don't know anything else, we'll just begin from here. We'll learn some basics of MySQL as well, and you can develop a web project by yourself. So action, we'll write the action attribute, and the action should take us to the index, right? So how this action works, we'll see, and the method that we are going to use here is get. So now this is the part where we use the get or post method, right? Either we can use the get or use post. If we are using get here, then we are supposed to use the do get method here, right? So this is where we used the get method. All right. Now, so let's make a form here, and let's keep it in the center. I hope you all remember how to make an HTML page. And we are going to create a form here. Let's write input type equals to, we want a text field. Right. That's it. And what we want here is a label. So what label we want is name. Okay. And let's add a break here so that our content will get to the next line. Copy this here. And it will be really hard for you if you are seeing this for the first time. It might get confusing to you, but if you practice it on your own, things will get clear to you. You can even ask me how to do this. Name, and then let's say password. Type password. Another break. Let's just have an input type equals to, let's type submit. And what do we want to return our submit button, to return on our submit button? It's, let's say we want login. So let's say we'll write login. So what we need to do is nothing, just we just need to refresh this page. Okay, so yeah, we just need to refresh this page, and we can see that the content that we had written till now, it's here, right? Now just closely look on what I write here, and so one more thing, what this submit button does, it submits the form, and it takes the form to the action, right? And where we have connected our action to the which file, right? It takes to that file. So when we'll click on that submit button, it will take us to the index.java file, right? And we can perform all the tasks from here. But right now, let's see just what happens. Okay, so just look at here. Let's say the name is name, and the password is pass, and we click on the login, right? So okay, so what happened here is we just got directed to this page, right? But what we want here is we want to get directed only if our name and password matches. When do we want to get directed? Only when the name and password get matches. And from where will the password and the name From where will we fetch the password and the name? Any ideas? From where will we fetch our password and the name? Okay, so before that we can have a register form as well. We'll see about it. But now let's open our MySQL. That is combining all the codes that we have learned until now. Use CD and let's see the tables that we have here. Let's select star from. Let's do that. So it has ID and a name. Okay, so let's keep name as a name and okay, so let's create another table. Create table. Let's say the name should be login. And what we need to have here name where get comma password where get. Now let's insert some data into it. Insert into login values. Let's say one name is ABC and the password is 123. We have inserted that. Now let's get to this place. Yeah, so first we need to configure things a little. Okay, so what we are going to do here is, yeah, okay. So what we are going to do here is, we have this page, which we'll look about later, and yeah. So now we are just going to connect our files with here. So first thing that we are going to do here is, we are going to have some string variables x1 request dot get parameter. We are using request dot get parameter here. Now, what is this and what does this do? We'll see that. Let's have another parameter. So, what we are going to do here is, we are just requesting some parameters, right? And where will this request come from, right? So when we are using this index.html and we are submitting our form, then the request is going to the servlet page index.java, and from there we are trying to get the parameters that we have requested. So for that, what we have to do is, we have to name these. What we have to do is, we have to have a name for these fields, right? We have to have a name for these fields so that we can, let's say, un or username, right? Let's give it a name as up, right? So these are the names that we have given to it. And now what we are going to do here is, yeah, so we'll go to index.java again, and what we are going to do is, we are going to write the names that we have written here, right? un and up. So what we are doing here is, when we are submitting our form here from here, with the parameters un and up, with their names, name of the fields as un and up, then what is happening from here is, the servlet is fetching those parameters from those text fields and is storing it into the string s1 and string s2. Is it understood? Is it hard to understand, or is it understood right now? Any answers? Any doubts?
Could you, sir, please repeat it again?
Okay, so see, it's a simple thing that what we are doing here is, we created a form here, right? We created a form here, and what we did, we added an text field here. We added a text field here to get the user's name. You can see in this, right? This is the text field here. To get the user's name, we have a text field here. And
Yes,
we had
yes.
named this text field as un, right? We have given a name to this text field as un. Similarly, we have another text field which is a password field actually. right? And we have given it as a name as UP, right? So, and we have another type of input as submit. So what submit does is when we click on the submit button, it submits our form and takes it to the it to where we have set the action to, right? It takes all the data to the file where we have specified in the action, right? It takes all the data to the file. Here we have the index file, right? So it takes all the data to the index file. From this, you from whatever data is present in the form, all the data gets to the index file. Now we need a way to fetch that data, right? We have sent the data,
Yes.
but we need a way to fetch it. So we have used the names, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to use those names only. Request.get parameter. So what we are doing is we are getting the parameters or getting the content in the those fields, and we are storing that in the s1 and s2 strings, right? You can see the un and up here,
Yes, yes, yes.
right?
Okay.
So it's just that it. And now what we are going to do here is so we have a id and password here. Now we need a way we can check whether our we need to check whether we have the same ID and password in a database or not. So for that, what we need to do is we need to create a data. We need to connect our database to it. So for that, we need to import the SQL as well, java.sql. So let's connect to it. Okay, we can either write the whole code here or we can just copy paste. Let's just copy paste it. It will save us some time. Mm, okay, so I don't know where it is. So let's continue with it. Let's write the whole code again. Yeah. So class dot for name. And see, the advantage of using a IDE is it recommends us many things, right? You don't have to type everything. It just recommends us JDBC. I don't think we'll need a C here. And now what we're going to do here is we're going to create a connection here. On equals to driver manager get connection. Now what we are going to do is we are going to write the connection URL JDBC. This connection code is really important. It's asked many times in the interviews. So you have to localhost and now our database name is CD and use false. Now the ID and the password of our database. If you had installed the database, then you must have set an ID and a password. Right. So now let's create a statement. Statement st is equals to on dot create state. Right. Now what we are going to do here is we are supposed to have a string to here. Right. So what we're actually doing here. So before that, let's do one thing. Let's do one thing from here. Yeah. So let's do one thing, which is instead of logging in, let's write register. Hit register. It will be easier to understand at first. Let's register. We are trying to insert the data in it. So what should be a query to insert? Insert into our table's name is it's login, right? Login values. Now the values that we are going to use here is okay. So here it's the tricky part. What we have to do here is so this is the way we are supposed to enter data in here, right? Because here what we are going to use the string variables, right? And we cannot directly use s1 in it, right? It will consider s1 as a data, right? But we need to use the value which is inside the we need to use the data which is inside the s1, right? So we are going to write it this way, right? If we just write it as s2 here, so it will consider s2 as the data, but we don't want that, right? What we want the data inside the s2. So that's how we'll write it. And now let's st dot execute update. Let's see whether we have an error here or not. Okay, so we're supposed to the one thing that we want to be printed here, println data inserted. Right. Now we'll just close this connection here, and what we're going to do is we are just completing our code for the exception handling. Let's see whether we don't have an extra brackets somewhere. So we have another bracket here. Alright, so this is the code for database connectivity. Now, if we get an error, then what we want to happen is let's bring that error. And this. So this is our complete code here. Let's see we don't have any error here. It's all clean. And let's see our database as well. We have the values ABC123 here right now. Select start from login, right? ABC123. And our database is connected to the servlet page, and our index.html file is connected to the servlet page as well. So now let's refresh everything and let's see whether it all works or not, right? So you can see that we have a name and password register here. So first type it as let's say QWE, right? And let's type the password as 456, right? So click on the register here. Let's see whether it works or not, right? We can see that data inserted here, right? And when did we write this in this index.java, right? So when the value gets inserted, what we are supposed to get displayed is data inserted, right? And see if try has executed, catch won't execute. So this is what at displayed right now. And now let's check whether the data has inserted in our database or not. See, you can see that QWE and 456 is the data here. So is it clear to everyone how did this work? Any doubts in it? Should I give one more demonstration? No answers?
Yes, sir. You can